When you think back to some of the best sounding games, I think many people will turn to the games before this century. Games from the PlayStation 1, N64, and SNES era. These games just have this very distinct sound to them. I don't think it's because of simple nostalgia what makes them sound good. I mean, I wasn't even alive when these consoles were released, but because of the limitations, technology-wise, composers and audio engineers had to make the most out of the hardware at hand, leading them to put a stronger emphasis on the mood we would feel from playing the game. As a quote-unquote modern gamer, I have gone back to retro games and played my fair share of them. Super Mario 64, Donkey Kong Country, Final Fantasy IV, Metal Gear Solid, all these games have soundtracks and audio design that create the perfect mood and have memorable songs to go along with them. But out of the retro games I've played, one game shines above the rest in my eyes when it comes to the soundtrack: Super Metroid. Its soundtrack is truly an all-time great, from the haunting sounds of Lower Brinstar to the heroic and dangerous theme of Norfair to whatever this theme is of Fan-Toon. So last year, speaking only of the 2D titles, I beat Super Metroid and Metroid Fusion and played a bit of Metroid 1, Metroid 2 and Metroid Zero Mission, alongside with me having beaten Metroid Dread in 2022, and I noted down one important detail that was shared amongst them: how the games sounded were essential to my experiences across these planets. I think we can immediately look at the title theme of the very first Metroid. For a sound chip as limited as they were back then, the title theme of Metroid is incredible. It sounds very ominous at first, setting the stage for a dark and hostile world that you'll be going up against, but then the tone switches, like the mood takes a full 180. It becomes a lot more welcoming, but not a complacent type of welcoming, like having a yes man that hypes you all the way. It's a mood that lets you know that you're going to be able to conquer this planet if you're willing to take the time to improve as a space warrior as your adventure continues. This feeling of adventure is something that is echoed throughout the many areas within Metroid. The Metroid games are very difficult in their combat and exploration, especially at the start of the games, and this sentiment is further emphasized through the dark, haunting and desolate melodies that we can hear throughout the game. But it's a bit like a coin, as on the other side of these songs, it sparks emotions of hope that you can take on anything. I think back to one of my favorite gaming music renditions and arrangements, the theme of Super Metroid, which has later on become the theme of Samus Aran. This piece of music and all its different arrangements are iconic. In its first appearance in Super, it starts off as a foreboding as it can get. The dark synth, heavy percussion, and opera-like chants accompanies the text and images you see on screen of Samus's last outing, handing over the baby Metroid, before we learn that the station has now gone dark. Yet, the triumphant horns come in, not as heavy as the opening segment, letting us know that Samus is more than capable to take on whatever comes in her way. But where my favorite version of this track plays is in Metroid Dread, has become one of the most iconic moments in Metroid history and a defining moment for Samus Aran. In Dread, Samus meets one of the last Chozo, Quiet Robe, who monologues some backstory to Samus, asking Samus to save them, and then the familiar notes start. We hear Samus say this. Kino ulo duruda. Ana maril sanur pura. Ay marhel kalon. This moment here is one of my all-time favorite moments in gaming. Having never played Metroid Other M, I think this is the first time we hear Samus speak in a mainline Metroid game, and it's just next level. Although the moment ends with the death of Quiet Robe to one of the Chozo robot ninjas, it shows how far Samus has come in this game, and we can take on any of the dangers that the game will pose. The evolution that a player gets in Metroid games is something I will talk about later on regarding its music, but another example to finish this section off with is the first area theme from Metroid Fusion, Sector 1 SRX. It's got these low-pitched synths that create uncertainty and unease, but they're also opposed by the continuous percussion that encourages you, with a hint of the synths taking a higher tone once in a while to create a brief moment of lightheartedness. Not exactly that, but a brighter mood as opposed to its constant oppressive atmosphere. Because of how dark the game is, from a thematic and artistic perspective, we as players need something to keep us pushing forward. Out of all the Metroid games that I've played, Fusion is the game that is consistently the most horrifying, a lot of which is thanks to not only smart gameplay elements, but its soundtrack, and more important to me, its sound design. Generally speaking, Metroid sound design has always been one of the most haunting elements that makes the game stand out from other titles in the genre. And by stand out, I mean like that guy you see in the corner at a party alone doing his own thing with everyone talking about how they're like the coolest guy around. I really like to think about Super Metroid's sound design, from the hollow sounding blast from your arm cannon to the cries of the enemies or light empty sounds when you land a jump. I will get to Fusion soon, but Super Metroid has probably the emptiest sound design out of the games. The sounds are loud enough for you to get some audio feedback about what is going on, but it sounds desolate enough to the player, make it more evident how alone you are in this world. Further adding the soundtrack, we have probably the strongest atmosphere out of all the Metroids. But in Fusion, opposed to Super, it's its soundtrack that does the heavy lifting in creating the sounds of dread. Just take a look at all the sector themes like Sector 4's or Sector 6's themes. Those really stand out and make the world feel very alien and untouched. Sector 4 has a continuous composition, acting as a method to create constant unease with its sound, whereas Sector 6 introduces brief pauses in between its beats, creating solitude and uncertainty about what's next to come. It's that shared feeling of uncertainty that the atmospheric tracks manage to create what makes this game's soundtrack stand out. And uncertainty is further created when we as a player can't get a good read on a situation, which is where the boss themes in the game come into play. From the core, Ceres, Neo Ridley, and the final battle against the SAX, all these themes share a high degree of chaos in them. Although they are composed perfectly, they just feel out of place with certain instruments, and at times the rhythm feels like it's offbeat, creating this feeling of horror. Then there is a theme from the Nightmare boss fight. Alongside its gruesome and horrifying design, the soundtrack fits perfectly, a slow, continuous build-up of sorts that never seems to creep up on you. It's great stuff, but although I think Super Metroid and Fusion are both consistently better at achieving these levels of sound and music quality, there is one area in all of Metroid that combines both to create the scariest and tensest moment I've ever experienced, those being the Emmy Zones and Emmy Chase themes from Metroid Dread. The lonely sounds that chime in with the synths echoing in the background, suddenly going high-pitched before lowering itself, until you get spotted where it goes full force. Fast pace, synths passing in and out and building up. It works so well because how the game manages to make sure you know the Emmys are indestructible, and the soundtrack really hammers it home. But as you kill the Emmys and progress the game, and progress in the other Metroids for that matter, you are a lot stronger than you were back at the start of the game. This increase in strength isn't just reflected in the power level, but also through the sounds, I think. It might just be me, but from my experiences with these games, I honestly feel like the sounds become more prominent as the game progresses. To be perfectly honest, as I'm writing this down as we speak, I've listened back to and compared how the endgame sounds compared to the start of the games, and I think they literally sound the same in terms of mood. Both Fusion and Dread's final bosses sound like your usual final boss fight. Side note, gotta give credit to Ravenbeak for being one of the best boss fights ever, but moving on. But when I went back to my Super gameplay and heard the familiar tune of Samus Aran, Galactic Space Warrior. It's a very triumphant tune, playing as you take down Mother Brain, and in all its sounds, despite having heard the song prior in the game, fully and truly reflects the evolution of both you and Samus Aran through planet Zebes. Although we quickly get to hear the boss theme as we escape to the surface, I stand firm that this song, alongside the final stance against Mother Brain, is where Super Metroid wraps up, and the rest is just a celebratory round. Although visually and gameplay wise, both Fusion and Dread make the evolution of your journey clear through those means, Super Metroid manages to make you hear the evolution of your capabilities, and that's just another reason why this game rocks. Although I have still to finish the first and second Metroid games, I think the 3 games I discussed today also apply to the other 2 titles and their respective remakes as well, that being how vital sound is to the overall Metroid experience. Although there are many games out there that have soundtracks that I generally prefer, there aren't that many of them that put this degree of importance regarding the balance between sound design, score, and gameplay like the Metroid games do. I think that's one of the reasons as to why Metroid has become such a mainstay in the gaming industry. Yes, its level design and loop has spawned an entire subgenre, but none of them have really managed to capture that Metroid feeling. That feeling of unease as you enter a new room, relief of finding a save room, or tension as you fight these abnormal creatures. And what is the linking factor? Well, it's the sound, and after the many games that I've played, there is no game that sounds like Metroid, 2D ones specifically. And with that, welcome to the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching all the way through to the end. It really means a lot. If you enjoyed the video, a like helps out a lot, and so too a dislike if you did not enjoy the video. Let me know in the comments how important of a role you think sound plays in the 2D Metroid games, as I would love to hear your thoughts about them. And if you want to see more from me, a subscribe comes a long way in helping the channel out, and is very much appreciated. But with that said, that's all for me. Thanks again for watching all the way to the end. It really means a lot. Have a good rest of your day, night, and week. Hope to see you in the next one. And with that, Storm out.